Hey there, welcome to Broaderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. Homeless. I'm not sure how I ended up here, living in a makeshift tent by the tracks, but I know one thing, I've never felt more alone. Not that I haven't been alone before, but this is different. The nights are colder than the days, and the nights last longer when you've got no roof over your head. The forest stretches out around me, filled with the sounds of creatures that only come alive when the sun dips below the horizon. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd live like this. I once had a job, an apartment, hell, even a cat. But life has a funny way of taking things from you piece by piece until there's nothing left but your own reflection staring back at you. And that reflection isn't always kind. The tracks next to me hum faintly, vibrating like they're alive. When a train roars by, the entire ground shakes, and for a brief moment, I feel like I'm being swallowed whole. I chose this spot because it's far enough from the town that nobody comes looking for trouble, but close enough that I can still hear the occasional echo of civilization, voices, cars, music drifting through the trees. At night, I keep myself company with my phone. It's the last piece of the life I used to know. One of those prepaid things I managed to pick up at a gas station. Not much of a connection out here, but it's enough to stream YouTube videos sometimes. I've always been drawn to scary stories. The darker, the better. There's something about horror that makes me feel less alone, like the fear inside me has a voice. Lately, though, the stories I listen to have been getting strange. They're different from the usual ghost tales. These feel more real, like someone's watching me while I listen. One night, after I'd scrolled through endless suggestions, I clicked on a video titled "The Ones in the Trees." It was late, and the wind outside my tent was howling through the branches. I had to turn the volume up to drown out the sound. The narrator spoke in a low, gravelly voice, telling the tale of a woman who lived alone near the woods, much like me. She'd started hearing things, whispers, footsteps, but when she looked, there was never anyone there. By the time the video ended, I felt an odd chill creeping up my spine. I brushed it off as the cold night air seeping through the worn-out tarp of my tent. But that was the first time I noticed something. In the distance, somewhere beyond the trees, I heard a sound, faint, like soft laughter. It was probably my imagination, I told myself, but it felt too close, too real. That night, I barely slept. The next day, I walked into town. I usually keep to myself, but the weight of the previous night stuck with me, like a bad dream I couldn't shake. I needed to be around people, even if they wouldn't acknowledge me. Town wasn't far, just a mile or two along the tracks, but I didn't linger. I picked up a few necessities and made my way back, hoping that the daylight would ease my nerves. It didn't. The closer I got to my camp, the more uneasy I felt. Something was off. I couldn't place it at first, but the air felt heavier, like it was thick with something unseen. My heart quickened as I approached my tent, and I realized what it was. There, hanging from one of the trees above my camp, was a bundle of sticks, tied together with a piece of dirty twine. I froze. I hadn't put it there. No one should have known I was here. My mind raced, trying to find an explanation. Maybe it was kids messing around, or maybe it had been there before and I hadn't noticed. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The sticks hadn't been there yesterday, and no one knew this spot but me. That night, I didn't listen to any more stories. I couldn't. Every sound outside my tent made me jump, every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch. I told myself it was just the wind, just the animals. But the laughter, it came back. Louder this time. Closer. I buried myself in my sleeping bag, trying to convince myself that it was all in my head. That I was tired, cold, and alone, and that isolation was playing tricks on me. But when I finally fell asleep, the dreams came. And in them, the woods were alive. The next morning, the first thing I did was tear down the bundle of sticks from the tree. It felt like an intrusion, like someone had left a message meant only for me. But why? And how did they know I was out here? I hadn't seen anyone since I set up camp, not a soul. I tossed the sticks into the underbrush and tried to forget about it, though the uneasy feeling in my stomach refused to fade. For most of the day, I kept myself busy gathering firewood and trying to make my little corner of the world a bit more livable. The forest was quiet, unusually so. No birds, no insects, just the distant hum of a train passing by on the tracks. The air hung heavy, almost suffocating, like something was watching me. I couldn't shake the sense of being observed. Every time I turned my head, I half expected to catch someone standing just beyond the trees, peering at me through the branches. But there was never anyone there. Just the wind and the shadows. By the time dusk fell, I had convinced myself that it was just paranoia. A couple of rough nights, some creepy stories, that was all it was. I hadn't slept well in days, and my mind was playing tricks on me. I just needed rest. But when the night came, it was impossible to ignore the feeling that had been gnawing at me all day. I sat by the small fire I had built, staring into the flames, but my mind kept drifting to the dark woods just beyond the flickering light. Every crack of a twig, every gust of wind through the leaves made my heart skip a beat. I told myself not to look, to just focus on the fire. But it was no use. My eyes kept darting to the trees, half expecting to see something, anything, lurking in the shadows. That's when I heard it again. The laughter. It wasn't distant this time. It was right there, just beyond the tree line. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The laughter was soft, like the giggles of a child, but distorted, like it didn't belong in this world. I stared into the darkness, my pulse racing, waiting for something, anything, to emerge. But nothing did. I stood up slowly, my eyes locked on the black void of the forest. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer. Just the rustling of leaves and the soft crackle of my fire. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was kids playing some sick joke. Maybe I wasn't as alone out here as I thought. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. This was something else, something wrong. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it into the trees, the beam cutting through the darkness. But the light revealed nothing, just empty branches swaying in the wind. The laughter stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. I turned off the flashlight and backed up slowly toward my tent, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I didn't want to turn my back on the woods, but I had no choice. I crawled into the tent, zipped it shut, and huddled in my sleeping bag, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to convince myself that I was safe, that whatever I heard was just in my head. But the fear wouldn't leave me. I lay there in the dark, straining to hear anything, any sign that I wasn't alone. but the night remained silent. At some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to the sound of something brushing against the side of my tent. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was enough to jolt me awake. My eyes shot open, and for a moment, I just lay there, my heart hammering in my chest, listening. There it was again. A soft rustling sound, like something or someone was moving outside. I reached for my flashlight with trembling hands and flicked it on. The beam lit up the inside of the tent, casting long, eerie shadows across the walls. I waited, listening, but the sound had stopped. Taking a deep breath, I slowly unzipped the tent flap and shone the light outside. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but the empty forest. No movement, no laughter, no sign of anything unusual. I was about to retreat back into the tent when I saw it, another bundle of sticks, hanging from a tree directly in front of me. But this one was different. It wasn't tied together like the last one. Instead, the sticks were arranged in the shape of a human figure. I felt a chill run down my spine. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the crude figure, my mind reeling. Someone had been here. Someone had left this for me. But why? I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat by the fire until the sun finally began to rise, casting a dull orange glow over the trees. But even in the daylight, the figure remained, a silent, ominous reminder that I wasn't alone out here. The morning light brought little comfort. I felt exhausted, the kind of weariness that seeps into your bones when sleep evades you. I kept glancing at the figure hanging from the tree, the crude representation of a person made from sticks and twine. What had once felt like a harmless prank now seemed like a twisted omen, a sign that I had crossed some invisible boundary. I knew I had to do something. Ignoring it wouldn't make it go away, and the unease gnawing at my insides was only getting worse. I grabbed a stick and approached the figure, half expecting it to sway or fall apart the closer I got. But it stood there, rigid and still, watching me with its lifeless eyes made of twigs. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was mocking me. I raised the stick and prodded it, and the entire thing swung back and forth, creaking softly. I stepped back, heart racing, the laughter echoing in my mind. "Stop it," I muttered, trying to shake off the creeping dread. "It's just a bunch of sticks." But as I looked into the depths of the woods, I couldn't help but feel that there was something more behind it, something waiting for me to let my guard down. I spent the day avoiding the area around my tent, moving deeper into the woods. I hoped to clear my head and shake off the lingering sense of dread. I wandered among the trees, losing myself in the natural beauty surrounding me. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns on the forest floor that were almost magical. But even in the beauty, I could sense the darkness lurking just beneath the surface. It was as if the forest was alive, holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I tried to focus on my surroundings, to lose myself in the serenity of nature, but the laughter returned, faint and haunting. It felt like a game, a sick, twisted game I had unwittingly stumbled into. I couldn't help but think back to the stories I had listened to, the ones that had led me here in the first place. Had I summoned something with my curiosity? When I returned to my camp as the sun began to set, I resolved to take the figure down. I needed to reclaim my space, to reassert my existence in this place that felt increasingly hostile. I marched straight to the tree, my heart pounding with every step. But when I reached for the figure, I froze. It had changed. The bundle of sticks that had once hung loosely now appeared to be woven tighter, more intricate. The twine had frayed in some places, revealing darker, richer strands that seemed almost wet. I took a step back, the air thick with dread. "Get a grip, Lauren," I told myself, but the words felt hollow. I glanced around the clearing, expecting to see someone watching me from the shadows, but there was nothing. Only the stillness of the forest, broken by the occasional rustle of leaves. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket, shattering the silence. I fished it out, relief flooding over me as I realized it was a notification from a video I had subscribed to. I opened the app, eager to drown out the growing anxiety with something familiar. The screen lit up, and my heart sank as the thumbnail for the next video appeared. It was titled "The Haunting in the Woods," featuring a face that seemed all too familiar, the same woman from the previous night's video. The caption read, "She never made it back." A chill ran down my spine as I stared at the screen. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the play button, but curiosity got the better of me. I clicked it, and the narrator's voice filled the air, recounting the woman's story in vivid detail. The tale unfolded like a slow nightmare, detailing how she had wandered into the woods, drawn by whispers that led her deeper and deeper until she disappeared without a trace. The stories of others like her, lost to the darkness, echoed in my mind. My eyes darted around the camp as the narrator's voice grew more ominous, speaking of unseen forces, of eyes watching from the trees. As the video reached its climax, the laughter returned, now louder and more sinister. I felt the hairs on my arms stand on end. I looked around, half expecting to see the twisted figure watching me from the shadows. And then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of branches snapping behind me. I whipped around, the flashlight beam sweeping through the trees, but there was nothing. Just darkness and the rustling of leaves. My breath quickened as I realized I was not alone. I stumbled backward, the weight of fear crashing down on me like a tidal wave. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice trembling. "Show yourself." Silence. The forest stood still, as if holding its breath. And then I saw it, just for a moment, a shadow flitting between the trees, quick and agile. My heart raced as I took a step forward, instinct urging me to confront whatever was out there. But then a deep sense of dread washed over me, freezing me in place. "Get out!" I heard a whisper, so soft I could barely catch it, but the command was clear. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and sprinted back to my tent, heart pounding in my chest. I threw myself inside, zipping the flap shut as if that could protect me from whatever had come for me. The laughter rose again, a cacophony of voices echoing in the trees, taunting me. I huddled in my sleeping bag, shaking, willing the night to end. My mind raced with questions. Who had been watching me? What did they want? But deep down, I knew the answer. I had opened a door I could never close. The night stretched endlessly, a dark abyss that closed in around me, suffocating and unyielding. I lay in the sleeping bag, my heart still racing, feeling the cold sweat on my skin. The laughter outside had subsided, but the echo of it haunted my mind. I could still hear the whispers, soft, seductive, and sinister, promising secrets just beyond the veil of darkness. I clutched my flashlight, its familiar weight offering a small measure of comfort. The forest felt alive, as if it was breathing alongside me, and I was its prey. Every rustle of leaves made me flinch. I wanted to close my eyes and drift off into a dreamless sleep, but the weight of dread kept me wide awake, peering into the shadows, searching for the source of the whispers. After what felt like hours, exhaustion finally pulled me under. I don't know how long I slept, but when I woke, it was to the sound of something tapping against the tent. My body jolted upright, and I strained to listen, the noise sending shards of ice down my spine. It was rhythmic, like fingers drumming lightly against the fabric, teasing me, beckoning me to emerge. "Stop it!" I shouted, my voice cracking. The tapping ceased, plunging me into silence once more. I felt a pulse of fear mixed with indignation. It was just a trick, a game. I had to stand my ground. With trembling hands, I unzipped the tent flap, half expecting to see the figure from last night, grinning and waving. Instead, the forest lay still, shrouded in a heavy fog that rolled in with the early morning light. The world outside was muted, the colors washed out and gray. I stepped out cautiously, the damp ground squishing beneath my worn shoes. My breath hung in the air, visible and ghostly. I looked around, and for a fleeting moment, everything seemed normal, too normal. The trees stood silent, their branches heavy with dew, but something felt off. A nagging sensation at the back of my mind, a whisper that told me I was still being watched. I glanced back at my tent, the cozy little refuge that now felt more like a prison. I took a deep breath and decided to explore the area, hoping to shake off the ominous feeling that had settled over me like a shroud. Maybe I could find a stream or a clearing to calm my nerves. As I ventured deeper into the woods, the trees loomed overhead, their trunks thick and gnarled. The silence wrapped around me, but it was different this time. It felt heavier, as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting. I focused on my surroundings, trying to take in the details, the soft crunch of leaves beneath my feet, the occasional distant call of a bird, and the faint rustle of something in the underbrush. I turned a corner and stumbled into a small clearing. It was beautiful, bathed in dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. Wildflowers danced in the gentle breeze, and for a moment I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But just as quickly, the unease returned, creeping in around the edges of the serene scene. In the center of the clearing lay an old, weathered log, its surface dark and rough. I approached it, curious. But when I reached the log, my breath caught in my throat. Carved into the wood were symbols, twisted, crude shapes that seemed almost like runes. They appeared ancient, like something out of a forgotten legend. I ran my fingers over them, feeling a chill run through me, a warning tinged with foreboding. "What is this?" I murmured to myself, scanning the clearing for any signs of life. The air felt thick, heavy with secrets. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting someone to emerge from the trees, but there was nothing but silence. A rustling sound caught my attention, and I spun around, my heart racing. The laughter returned, faint but distinct, echoing from the direction of my tent. It was taunting me, teasing me to return, as if it knew I was alone and vulnerable. I couldn't go back there. Not with whatever was toying with me. I turned and hurried deeper into the woods, adrenaline surging through my veins. The laughter faded into the background, but the forest seemed to close in around me, branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. As I walked, I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination. I was losing my mind. But then I saw it again, the shadow flitting between the trees. It was fast, darting from one trunk to another, always just out of reach. My breath quickened, and panic rose in my throat. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice ringing through the stillness, but my words felt hollow, swallowed by the vastness of the forest. I could feel the weight of eyes on me, watching, waiting for me to falter. I stumbled over roots and branches, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. I had to get away from here. I had to find a way back to civilization, to safety. But as I turned to retrace my steps, the laughter returned, louder and closer, echoing in the air like a cruel symphony. I ran, branches scratching at my arms and legs as I plunged through the underbrush. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat urging me to flee. I didn't stop to think, just pushed myself forward, desperate to escape whatever hunted me. But then I tripped, falling hard against the ground. Pain shot through my ankle, and I bit back a cry as I scrambled to my feet. The laughter faded, replaced by a whisper, cold and insidious. "Come play with us, Lauren." I froze, dread washing over me. I looked around, my eyes wide with fear. The shadows shifted, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw them, figures flitting between the trees, just out of sight. Panic clawed at my throat as I turned and limped back toward my tent, praying that I could make it back before whatever was following me caught up. But as I neared my campsite, the laughter crescendoed, ringing in my ears, overwhelming me. It filled the air, becoming a cacophony of voices, calling out my name. I stumbled into the clearing, breathless and terrified, and the sight before me made my blood run cold. The figure from the tree was gone. In its place was a circle of small, twisted figures made from sticks, arranged in a grotesque imitation of a ritual. They stood as sentinels, watching me with empty eyes, and at the center of the circle lay a small bundle wrapped in burlap. I hesitated, the fear gripping me tight. I could feel the whispers urging me to approach, to uncover what lay beneath the fabric. But a deep instinct screamed for me to turn and run. In that moment, the forest came alive with sound, the trees whispering in an unintelligible language, urging me forward. I stood frozen, torn between curiosity and the primal urge to escape. The voices swelled, blending into a symphony of chaos, and then, without thinking, I dashed back into the woods, my heart racing. I could hear them behind me, the laughter, the whispers, all growing louder. I stumbled through the underbrush, branches clawing at my clothes, desperate to put distance between myself and whatever was pursuing me. But no matter how fast I ran, the darkness always seemed to be right behind me. The forest morphed around me, a labyrinth of shadows and creeping dread. I could feel the ground shift beneath my feet, the damp earth threatening to swallow me whole. Each step was a battle against gravity and fear, as if the very forest was conspiring to keep me from escape. I didn't dare look back, terrified of what I might see. Branches clawed at my skin, leaving thin lines of pain that mingled with the growing panic inside me. I stumbled over a root, crashing to the ground. For a moment, the world spun, and I gasped for breath, heart pounding like a war drum. I could feel the cool earth beneath me, the scent of damp soil and decaying leaves invading my senses, grounding me in the chaos. I pushed myself up, wiping dirt from my palms, forcing myself to move. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, yet curiosity tugged at the edges of my mind, urging me to turn around and confront whatever haunted me. I shook my head violently, banishing those thoughts. I was not going to let whatever this was get the better of me. As I ran deeper into the woods, the sounds of the night came alive, distant howls, rustling leaves, the scuttling of small creatures. But the laughter was gone, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed down on me like a shroud. I strained to listen, each crack of a twig setting my nerves on edge. Was I alone now? Had I lost them? Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl rumbling from somewhere in the darkness. It sent a jolt of ice through my veins. My heart raced anew, pumping adrenaline that sharpened my senses. I crouched low, hiding behind a thick bush, heart hammering in my chest, breath shallow and quiet. Peering through the branches, I scanned the area, my eyes darting in search of movement. The shadows shifted, and for a moment, I thought I saw something large, dark, and menacing moving between the trees. It paused, its shape blending seamlessly with the night, and I felt an overwhelming urge to bolt. But I couldn't. I had to know what it was. I held my breath as it drew closer, inching my way along the underbrush. The low growl morphed into a series of sharp barks, echoing through the trees. I could see it now, a massive figure with matted fur and glowing eyes that reflected the faint moonlight. It was unlike any creature I had ever seen, part wolf, part shadow, with a twisted, elongated snout and a body that seemed to shimmer in and out of existence. My heart raced as it prowled closer, its nostrils flaring as it caught my scent. I felt a cold sweat break out across my brow. There was no way I could escape without being seen. Panic clawed at my throat, urging me to run, but my legs felt like lead. In that instant, the creature paused, its gaze fixed in my direction. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't find me. But then it tilted its head, as if listening to something beyond my perception. The air grew heavy with tension, and for a heartbeat, everything fell silent. Suddenly, the laughter erupted again, wild and chaotic, coming from all around me, echoing off the trees. The creature snapped its head toward the sound, and in that moment of distraction, I seized my chance. I turned and sprinted deeper into the woods, branches whipping against my skin like angry fingers. Each footfall was a frantic plea for survival, and I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me, dozens of them, watching from the shadows. The whispers swelled again, wrapping around me like a noose, urging me to come back, to join the darkness. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to run faster, to drown out their calls. But the forest betrayed me, roots and vines grabbing at my feet, tangling around my ankles like malevolent spirits. I fell again, this time hitting the ground hard, the impact jolting through my bones. Pain shot through my body, but there was no time to linger. I scrambled back to my feet, my breath coming in ragged gasps. As I continued to flee, a horrifying thought struck me. What if I was running in circles? What if I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making? I had to find a landmark, something familiar. I needed to escape this twisted maze. With renewed determination, I scanned the darkness for any sign of the path I had come from. The shadows loomed large, and I was utterly alone. I couldn't let myself succumb to despair. I would not become another lost soul in this accursed place. I pushed on, heart pounding in my chest, adrenaline fueling my movements. The underbrush thickened, each step harder than the last as I fought against the grip of the forest. Just when I thought I might collapse, I caught a glimpse of something, a flicker of light in the distance. Hope ignited within me. I focused on that light, pushing through the branches and brambles, determination driving me forward. It danced just out of reach, teasing me, but I had to get there. I had to escape. As I drew closer, the light morphed into a flickering flame. A campfire? A sign of life? My heart leapt. I stumbled through the final stretch of underbrush, crashing into a small clearing. What I found sent chills cascading down my spine. The fire crackled, its glow illuminating a circle of figures seated around it. They were the twisted, wooden shapes I had seen earlier, now animated and alive, their features grotesque and unsettling. Their laughter filled the air, a cacophony of sound that made my skin crawl. They looked at me with hollow eyes, and I felt the weight of their gaze pressing down on me, binding me to the spot. I stepped back, my heart racing. This wasn't just a fire. It was a ritual, a dark communion that I had unwittingly stumbled upon. The air thickened with a palpable energy, as if the very ground beneath me pulsed with life, malevolent and ancient. Then I saw the burlap sack lying at the edge of the fire, half hidden in the shadows. My mind raced back to what I had seen earlier. I had to know what was inside. But a voice in my head screamed for me to run, to get as far away as possible from this place. Before I could make a decision, one of the figures turned toward me, its face obscured by shadows. "Join us, Lauren," it beckoned, its voice a haunting whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "You're one of us now." I couldn't take it anymore. With a burst of adrenaline, I turned and ran. The laughter chased me, echoing in the trees, mingling with the growls of the creature that was surely still behind me. I pushed myself harder, fighting against the despair that threatened to pull me down. But the forest was relentless. No matter how fast I ran, the shadows followed. The laughter grew louder, the whispers turning into a cacophony of voices, each urging me to turn back, to join their dark revelry. I reached a fork in the path, left or right. Panic clawed at my throat as I tried to decide. The darkness pressed in, the laughter growing closer. I had to choose. I took a deep breath and veered left, hoping for salvation. The darkness enveloped me, and I could feel the weight of the night closing in. I stumbled forward, praying for the light to return, for a way out of this nightmare. And then, just as I thought I might escape, the ground beneath me gave way, and I plunged into darkness. I fell, tumbling through an abyss of darkness. The air rushed past me, cold and suffocating. I felt weightless, as if I were suspended in some dark void, far from reality. Panic clawed at my insides, my heart thundering against my ribcage like a caged animal desperate to be free. Then, with a sickening thud, I landed hard on a surface that was both soft and unyielding. Pain exploded through my body, and I gasped, drawing in a breath that tasted of damp earth and decay. For a moment, everything was still, my heart racing in the silence. As I lay there, the shadows swirled around me, thick and oppressive. I blinked, trying to make sense of my surroundings. I was in a small, dimly lit chamber, the walls glistening with moisture. Faint light flickered from above, illuminating the rough-hewn stones. It felt like a forgotten cave, hidden away from the world above. Slowly, I pushed myself up, wincing at the ache in my limbs. My palms scraped against the cold stone, and I could feel a damp chill seeping into my bones. I took a moment to collect my thoughts, fighting the urge to panic. The laughter had faded, but I could still hear the faint whispers echoing in my mind. They seemed to wrap around me, invasive and unsettling. I looked around, trying to orient myself in this disorienting space. My eyes landed on something shiny half buried in the dirt, a small mirror, its surface cracked and tarnished. I reached for it, drawn in by the promise of reflection. As I grasped it, a rush of memories flooded back. Images of my life before everything had gone wrong flickered in my mind, moments of warmth, laughter, fleeting joys. But alongside them, shadows loomed, memories of loss, betrayal, despair. In the mirror's depths, I saw not just my reflection but a kaleidoscope of my life, twisted and warped. I recoiled, dropping the mirror as if it had burned me. It hit the ground with a soft thud, and the whispers grew louder, almost mocking. "You can't escape the truth, Lauren," they taunted. "You belong here, with us." I shook my head, desperation clawing at my throat. "No, this isn't real." My voice echoed in the chamber, bouncing back at me, amplifying my terror. I staggered back, my back hitting the damp wall. I had to escape, there had to be a way out. Suddenly, I noticed a faint glimmer of light seeping through a narrow crack in the wall. Hope surged within me, igniting a fire I thought had been extinguished. I scrambled toward it, my heart racing with determination. I pressed my palms against the cold stone, feeling the jagged edges bite into my skin as I pushed against the wall. The light beckoned, illuminating my path as I clawed at the crack, my fingers working feverishly to widen the gap. The whispers faded, replaced by the sound of my own ragged breath, mingling with the sound of dirt and stone scraping against each other. With a final shove, the wall gave way, revealing a tunnel that stretched beyond the light. I hesitated for only a moment, listening intently for any sign of pursuit, then plunged into the narrow passage. The darkness engulfed me, and I crawled through the dirt and dampness, desperation driving me forward. The tunnel twisted and turned, forcing me to crawl and squeeze through spaces that felt impossibly small. I pushed on, my mind racing with thoughts of what lay behind me. I could still feel the eyes watching, the laughter echoing in the back of my mind like a sinister lullaby. With every inch I crawled, I felt the grip of the forest loosening. I was breaking free, reclaiming my life. The tunnel began to widen, and I sensed that I was nearing an end. Hope blossomed within me, pushing me onward. Finally, I emerged into a larger chamber, the air lighter and fresher. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, revealing walls adorned with ancient symbols and markings that glowed faintly, casting eerie shadows. In the center of the room stood a stone altar, its surface lined with offerings, dried flowers, small trinkets, and bones. I froze, dread settling over me like a heavy blanket. This was a place of worship, of dark rituals. I could feel the energy in the room shifting, pulling at me like a current. I backed away, my heart pounding, searching for an exit. Then I noticed something moving near the altar. A figure stepped into the light, and my breath hitched in my throat. It was one of the grotesque figures from before, its features sharper, more defined in this dim light. It turned its hollow gaze toward me, a twisted smile spreading across its face. "Welcome, Lauren," it said, its voice a haunting melody that sent chills down my spine. "You've finally come home." "Home?" I echoed, my voice trembling. "This isn't home. I want to leave." The figure laughed, a sound that reverberated through the chamber. "You can't leave, dear one. You are part of this now. You've heard the stories, felt the darkness. You belong to us." I felt panic rise within me, threatening to consume me whole. No. I refused to accept this. I turned and ran, desperate to escape the suffocating grip of this place. I dashed past the altar, toward another passage that led out of the chamber. I could hear the figure's laughter behind me, a twisted symphony of joy and malice that echoed through the walls. My heart raced as I sprinted down the tunnel, my breath coming in frantic gasps. Suddenly, the ground beneath me shifted, and I stumbled, falling hard to the ground. I felt a sharp pain in my ankle, but I couldn't afford to stop. With a surge of adrenaline, I pushed myself back up, limping forward. The laughter grew fainter, replaced by the sound of rushing water. Hope surged again. Maybe this tunnel led to the outside, to freedom. I fought through the pain, refusing to let it slow me down. Finally, the tunnel opened into a cavern, the sound of rushing water growing louder. I stumbled toward the edge of a massive underground river, its surface shimmering in the dim light. Without thinking, I plunged into the icy water, gasping as the current swept me away. I fought against it, my body screaming in protest, but I had to escape. I had to get out. The water rushed around me, dragging me deeper into the darkness. I kicked and flailed, desperately trying to find the surface. Just as my lungs burned and my vision began to blur, I broke through, gasping for air. I found myself in a wider section of the river, the current less aggressive. I paddled frantically, clinging to the hope that there was an end to this nightmare. The river twisted and turned, carrying me away from the shadows that had haunted me. But as I swam, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was still watching, lurking just beyond my reach. I felt their laughter echoing in my ears, their whispers dancing on the edges of my consciousness. With every stroke, I fought against the tide, determined to break free from the grip of the forest and the horrors I had faced. I would not let them win. I would not become a part of their dark tale. As I emerged from the river, collapsing on the bank, I gasped for air, feeling the cool night breeze wash over me. I lay there, trembling, drenched and exhausted, but alive. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The shadows would not let me go so easily. I would have to face them again, confront the truth that lay within the depths of my mind. I would have to return, but not before I found a way to reclaim my life. And so, with trembling limbs and a heart full of dread, I began my journey back, not knowing what awaited me in the darkness. Ness. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.